Initializing Enduring Play Podcast Season 1 engine. Decompressing audio. Synchronizing waveforms. Reticulating splines. Launching podcast lobby.
Welcome back to Enduring Play, the podcast where we explore what it takes to create video games that don't just survive, but thrive. I'm your host, Cheryl Platts, video game designer, director, and author of the Game Development Strategy Guide from Rosenfeld Media. In this first season of the Enduring Play podcast, we focus on going deep with some of the folks who were interviewed for my book and get the full story. In today's episode, we explore Prosocial Gaming with our guest, Carlos Figueiredo, Director of Trust and Safety at Mojang Studios, which you probably know for their breakout hit, Minecraft. Today's episode explores the complexity of designing for prosocial gaming and social dynamics at the scale of hundreds of millions of players. And just thinking of that kind of scale is overwhelming at times. But today's guest also brings a message of hope. Here's a little preview.
My experience throughout my whole career, specifically talking about gaming communities now, most of the interactions, let's talk about chat tags and things like that, are very much aligned with the purpose of those platforms and games. It's very much people talking about the game itself, talking about their hobbies, the things they love.
Let's get into the game.
Player 1, Cheryl Platts. Player 2, Carlos Figueiredo. Podcast level, start.
Carlos, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Cheryl. And happy to talk about my background if you want me to start there, and how did I find myself in the games industry.
That would be amazing.
I moved from Brazil to Canada back at the end of 2006. My professional life has really been here in Canada, but I lived quite a big chunk of my life in Brazil, right? So I'm a dual citizen. And in Brazil, just before I moved, I studied philosophy for 2 years. And then you're like, how come from philosophy to player safety, right? But I think there are cool connections there. And for the first 2 years here in Canada, living in Kelowna in British Columbia, I got to do a lot of different jobs. Like pretty much everything under the sun, like working farms, retail, construction, so many different things. And then I learned about this little company that wasn't so little anymore because it had been acquired by Disney the year prior.
Launching. Initial cutscene. History of Club Penguin.
In order to fully appreciate our guest's journey, you may want some additional background on the game that launched his career. Club Penguin was a massively multiplayer online game, or MMO, that was uniquely designed for children ages 6 through 14, and was available for about 12 years from 2005 through 2017. According to one report in Variety, during a Star Wars-themed takeover, over 200 million penguins had been created since the game's launch as of 2013. Club Penguin was a mix of pay-to-access and pay-to-express business models. They offered $5 monthly subscriptions and a variety of digital purchases. However, the game was also free to play for the vast majority of its players. Unlike competitors like Neopets, who were fairly direct about product placement, Club Penguin sidestepped direct advertising by becoming an extension of Disney Online Studios and the company's broader entertainment marketing efforts. It was, in some ways, the unofficial descendant of games like Toontown Online, Pixie Hollow, and Pirates of the Caribbean Online. That's all fine, but what was Club Penguin like? The podcast format doesn't really do the chaotic videos justice. You'll find videos of the poignant final server countdowns, with colorfully diverse, cartoon-style penguins crowded into plazas, emoting and animating their love for one another. One Redditor, in 2024, looked back at the game with this take posted to the still thriving Club Penguin Reddit.
I personally loved how you could express yourself with all different kinds of clothes, accessories. There were always cool events and parties to look forward to. The puffles, the fun games you had to do in order to get coins, meeting other penguins. It was all amazing.
Club Penguin, like its predecessor Toontown Online, was known for very strict limitations on player social interactions in the name of player safety. Even then, life finds a way. and it was a constant battle for the team to ensure players were not putting themselves in harm's way. Let's hear from Carlos about how he ended up at Club Penguin in the first place.
It was at the end of 2008, just around the time that they were releasing Portuguese in the game, like localizing the game in Portuguese. The second language of Club Penguin, right, obviously was in English. So it was really well timed because Portuguese is my mother language, right? And then I got to help them not only with what I was originally hired for to do player support and moderation as well, so you already see the safety part there, but I also did help them with translations, quality assurance. I even did like acting, like where the famous penguins, they would show up. Like I did all sorts of things like that, and I'm so grateful because 6 years of really intense learning and being fascinated by a company that really saw safety as crucial to everything they did, right? Like player safety was so essential to Club Penguin. Towards the tail end of my time there, the last 2 years or so, I had a different job. I worked on the chat filtering management. So there was a really cool tools and systems, and I got to do chat filtering management for Portuguese and a little bit in English.
Podcast level paused. Begin host commentary.
As you might imagine, maintaining a massively multiplayer online gaming environment aimed at children is a huge responsibility, especially with a brand like Disney behind you. It's not terribly surprising that one of the lasting but quieter legacies of Club Penguin starts with Two Hat Security, a startup that spun out of the game's work in 2012. At the time, the concept of an artificial intelligence-powered content moderation platform was truly groundbreaking, and at times required supercomputing resources and university partnerships to get off the ground. As reported by OKGo,
we now process over 100 billion human interactions every month. To put it in perspective, that's 6 times the reported size of Twitter.
Two Hat was selected by the World Economic Forum in 2020 as one of their technology pioneers, which turned out to be foreshadowing for their eventual acquisition by current AI industry leader Microsoft in October 2021. The software Two Hat developed is known to many game developers today as Community Sift, used to configure and deploy real-time content moderation strategies like text chat moderation. Carlos ended up joining the Two Hat team, which also meant shifting focus from working on one game, Club Penguin, to working on a platform tool intended to serve many games.
Loading. Podcast level 2. Career shift to platform tools.
After that, after 6 years at Club Penguin, I joined a company called Two Hat Security. I joined to also build the Portuguese language in the filter, and I became a team leader for the language and culture team. So a really exciting, cool team that was building all the different languages in the filter. So there was a lot of cultural nuance and understanding the different markets, the different languages, all the pop culture aspects around the languages. From there, I became director of client success. So I was responsible for the language and culture area, but also for the business to business relationship, because Two Hat created a tool called Community Sift, so chat filtering, classification for pretty much anywhere on the internet that has chat. The Two Hat ended up doing more than that, also image filtering and other things. So I was there for 7 years and a half. From little startup all the way up to the moment where Microsoft acquired Two Hat. So now that team is a part of the Xbox team, and I was there at the time of acquisition at the end of 2021.
Launching. Narrative cutscene. Minecraft. Background information.
And it's that acquisition of Two Hat that brought our guest today, Carlos, into the Microsoft fold, starting the chain of events that brought him to his current position as Director of Trust and Safety for Mojang Studios, the game studio behind Minecraft, that was also acquired by Microsoft in 2014, a few years earlier. Minecraft is one of the biggest sandbox survival games, a massively multiplayer environment that gives players the power not just to play, but to create and host their own servers and worlds within a broader ecosystem. Minecraft has gone on to inspire an entire transmedia universe filled with strange, pixelated creatures. In 2025 alone, we've seen McDonald's Happy Meal toys and a hit film starring Jack Black. Carlos plays a key role in Minecraft's ongoing success as Director of Player Trust and Safety. Minecraft is a game built for kids and families, and for such a game to succeed, parents must be able to trust that their kids can operate with reasonable autonomy on the platform without undue danger. Carlos's experience dating all the way back to Club Penguin is the perfect preparation for this big responsibility.
Player 2, level up. Director of Player Trust and Safety. New career quest unlocked.
And that's how I joined Microsoft, right? As a larger company. And shortly after that, I saw the job of player safety, the director of player safety at Mojang open up. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this job was written for me. Like, you know, one of those moments where you think, I've spent all that time at Club Penguin, all that time then working for a company basically where I was interfacing. I was the person connecting all the heads of safety, all the directors of operations, all the people who were working in UX and working in support, anybody who was like really having to deal with how do we foster a healthier online community in our games? How do you protect our players from disruption and harms in our games? I was connecting those folks, right? So I got to say, okay, now that I'm joining Minecraft, I get to do those things. I get to do the practical application of all those best practices that I have been discussing and creating and evolving with people globally, right? I omitted something in my journey at Two Hat. There was a moment there that I met my incredible co-founders of what was then called the Fair Play Alliance and now is TIG, Thriving in Games Group. So that was 2017, and it was a great opportunity we came together and we saw, wow, there's this appetite to create a grassroots community of practice for us to talk about how are we designing games to be conducive to pro-social behaviors, to a thriving community. So this is where I find myself now is I am working in Minecraft, and I am one of the co-founders of the Thriving in Games group.
Launching tutorial module. Defining pro-social gaming.
Thank you for pointing out that key moment, not just for your career, but the industry in general, because the Thriving in Games group, this consortium of game developers with a passion for post-social gaming from major game developers across the industry, is really defining a new path forward for positive gaming experiences. Can you define pro-social gaming for our listeners?
When I think about pro-social behavior, I really think there are many different ways to define it, right? But one way to define and to start there is to think about what is the purpose of games. Different games will have different goals, but I think we could have a good definition, at least as a starting point that we can inspect, that games are really created for people to have fun. The context of pro-social, then we're talking about multiplayer experiences and people playing together. So I really think that there's this idea of what are the behaviors that are aligned with the intended experiences of a platform or a game, right? The game is created with an intention of people playing it, people being challenged by the game, learning. In certain cases, it's about cooperation and people working together in the game. So I would say that's a good definition, that anything that's additive to that is not orthogonal to that design is potentially pro-social, because then we also have to say, well, yes, but maybe some intended experiences are more neutral, right? They're not really fostering a healthier experience or really being about connection and collaboration and trust and empathy and things like that. And that's true. So yeah, maybe that definition is not enough. So maybe we need to go a little bit further. We need to say pro-social behavior is something that's actively contributing to a thriving community. So then we could look at some examples of things like prosocial behavior might be when you see a player helping somebody else. That's really cool. They're helping a new player. There's that element of community, of a community of belonging, like that players take pride in that community and they're welcoming to other people coming and joining the game. So they want to make the lives of new players a little bit easier. That's really cool. Or maybe they teach other players how to do certain things in the game. Or they ask other players to play with them and form teams and form bonds and friendship.
You worked on a product called Community Sift. And so your background is incredibly rich because you've seen what it takes to do the automated technology. Like I've worked on games that use Community Sift to catch problematic text. And then you mentioned that magical moment when you got to start applying the best practices. I'm curious, when you found yourself making that transition, what was the biggest surprise when you kind of crossed from working on the tools side to applying the best practices? Was there anything that didn't go as intended as you thought it would?
I was surprised by the fact that a lot of the best practices that I was talking about for so many years made so much sense practically. You know, I'm not saying this as a like, oh, I had everything right. It's the reality is that I was talking about best practices with the industry, for the industry, right? So even though I wasn't applying those practices on my own, on a specific game that I was working for, I was consulting with multiple people who had roles like I do nowadays, contending with all those different scenarios in a practical situation. So I learned a lot from people. I learned a lot from people who were in the trenches doing this work. So in a sense, like, you know, I'm saying surprised, but it made sense, right? Like it made sense that a lot of the things that I was talking about in different talks around the globe, in symposiums and conversations with people, they actually work, right? So when I joined Minecraft, I had a map of, at least I knew where to start, right? Like I knew like, okay, I know exactly where we need to put our focus. And of course, from that point onwards, then it was a lot about adaptation.
Podcast level paused. Begin host commentary.
As we wrap up this tour of Carlos's early career that led him to Minecraft, we see this sort of serendipity. The time he spent as a person working on the platform for Community Sift gave him this exposure across the needs of multiple companies, which allowed him to engage in the community that became the Thriving in Games group and informed his perspective about best practices. And he ended up shaping the industry's best practices before he ever became the director of trust and safety at Minecraft. Sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Launching podcast level 3. Adaptive player safety.
Can you explain a little bit more about why adaptation is so important to your current role in trust and safety at Minecraft?
It's very clear that there's not one size fits all when you're talking about player safety and ensuring that you are protecting the vibrancy and creativity of a game community while protecting players from harmful and disruptive behavior, right? Some games are more mature, right? So they have an overall, they're catering maybe to a certain age that's older and the expectations around there are different. We're talking maybe about a shooter game. That's very different from a game where you have mixed audiences and you have also young players and you have more a concept of creativity and folks working together in the game, right? Like those are very different contexts. So you need to be able to deeply understand and appreciate those contexts. So you are not doing things like heavy-handed approaches, right? Like over-filtering and stuff like that. From one perspective, I had to also really humble myself really quickly and think, well, a lot of the things, the approaches that I thought that would maybe work in certain scenarios, maybe they're not going to be the best approach for Minecraft. A game, it has many games actually, right? A brand that has many games, it has many contexts, right? So for example, a great context here is, if you're familiar with Minecraft Realms, a subscription you can have, and then you have, friends and family join and play with you. That's wildly different from playing in a game that has like a server with quote unquote strangers, So I had to quickly adapt and really learn, okay, what do players need? Right? Like, what do players need in this context here? Like that understanding that safety can't just be a definition that you're able to apply everywhere. Safety can be deeply personal, and it depends on many factors, like what players need depending on the situation.
In hindsight, as you describe it, that contextual revelation makes so much sense. And as someone who has recently gone from totally family-oriented games to working on a combat-based game, it was a big wake-up call for me to realize that things that weren't appropriate in a general chat were necessary for our players to actively discuss a combat-based game.
Launching tutorial level. Learning from player behavior at scale.
Now, what I hear when I hear you talk about the importance of context, which might be difficult for some of our listeners to hear, is that there's actually no silver bullet when it comes to player safety. No magical switch you just flip to get it right. How do you approach getting that context for a massive game like Minecraft? When you're getting player context, are you doing it on the macro through user research or something like that? Or in the micro in real time?
Oh, I love the question. And just to address your question to the very beginning there, you said there's no silver bullet. At the risk of getting too philosophical here, I think we live at a time that there's a lot of uncertainty. And that uncertainty, as you know, is a very uncomfortable thing for human beings, right? So we tend to think about, we just want a plan. We just want, like, tell me what to do.
Yes.
When it comes to the complexities of human behavior, and specifically online behavior and social dynamics and player safety, there's not a lot of certainties, right? And it's a lot of ambiguity. Human beings, when they interact with each other, they can be quite complex and difficult to navigate that. So I think it's important to start there, and I think it's liberating to have that learning mentality, right? To try things out, test, listen to the player. So to your specific part of the question about real-time insights versus UX approaches, when we think about metrics, insights, when we think about learning, we do the quantitative stuff for sure, right? Like all the systems that we have, all the metrics that we have internally, of course, like working very closely with our compliance team, and now we're always ensuring that everything that we're doing is with the utmost respect and integrity in terms of Mojang and Microsoft practices and all those things. And we have all those metrics and all like the evidence that we need when we're taking action regarding to player safety, right? So we have all that great quantitative stuff, right? That's really important.
Podcast level paused. Begin host commentary.
For those folks who are not normally doing research, quantitative refers to evaluations driven primarily by measurable quantities, often numeric, like how many people have done a thing or how much of a thing has been observed, as opposed to qualitative evaluation, which is often more subjective and involves descriptions and evaluations of behavior and those sorts of things. And in this case specifically, talking about quantitative data as it pertains to the actual telemetry driven by the actual player behavior inside your game.
But we have also done player safety surveys with friends in Xbox, for example, right? And other Mojang partners. So we also do listen to players in different ways, including qualitative, because then we can really try to understand what players really need, what's important to them. And, you would be amazed at also seeing how people really care about player safety in different ways. They might just talk about it in different manners, but when I joined the company, I was getting feedback about player safety from other people in the company, from other people at Microsoft who are also Minecraft players.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe their child is playing Minecraft, or maybe they are playing Minecraft. They have different thoughts and suggestions, So we've learned so much from players, and we're always listening, right? So the importance of clear communication both ways, listening, being very transparent about what we do. I think that's the way to achieve that balance that you're talking about, getting context right, balancing what I call safety with expression, which is so difficult. Those are things that we do all the time. We're always having to challenge our biases, which I think it's something that is not talked about enough in the area of player safety. But you have to contend with your bias all the time, and finding ways to calibrate that, to challenge that. I think it's so important.
Do you think developers can effectively engage in player safety work without engaging in the communities for which they're designing? One thing I've observed a few times is that it seems easy for some game developers to just check out, to turn off global chat, for example. It often starts as a personal choice, but it leads to disconnection from the severity of what might really be happening in the community. Is it reasonable to think we can design for communities without being in them?
Going to be alienating, right? Potentially really deeply alienating to both sides, where players might really feel like, wow, they don't get us, they don't get what we need and what we've been talking about or asking. And then for developers to also be disconnected from it, right? Like I've noticed this at both Club Penguin and Minecraft, that so important for the team to be in touch with the reality of the player experience. It's so important. Being in the game, experiencing it from the player perspective as much as possible. That's another way to get some qualitative insight, right? Other than just, doing the survey. Like, the survey is super valuable, but as you know, there is limitation to what you get in a survey from observing. Like, play tests and stuff like that are super awesome. But when you are in the game, when you're immersed in the community, now you have this dual vision, right? Like, you have the internal vision, but then you also have the vision from the player as a player, right? I think that's so valuable. Like, some of the most insightful partners that I find inside of Mojang are people who play Minecraft a lot. They either hosted their own server in the past, or they actively play in realms with their families and friends all the time. And that I get to really experience a whole different level of it. And I try to also play as much as I can to really experience the friction and the issues, right?
Podcast level paused. Begin host commentary.
Carlos doesn't just talk about player safety, he constantly seeks to better understand and create the conditions that enable that safety. That's a passion I've seen before in one of his peers from the Thriving in Games group, West Hart. West is head of player dynamics, an emerging design discipline at Riot Games. West also wrote many of the materials that make up the Digital Thriving Playbook, a free resource provided by the Thriving in Games group online that I've cited in my book, The Game Development Strategy Guide, as a part of guidance on how to think about creating prosocial games. As Carlos continues in his response to my question about designing in context for communities, he calls out this emerging design discipline in his own way.
Loading. Level 4. Player safety as a game design discipline.
I really believe that player safety is a discipline of game design. I also use the term player safety, but I think it's so much broader than what industry usually thinks about. Industry thinks about player safety as dealing with the negative. I think about player safety as an integral part of a thriving community. So it's more than just designing systems to deal with the negative. It's also about social features. It's about the dynamics between the players. I envelop it inside the term player safety, because of course that's my title and my world. But the only way that as a player safety team we can do more than block the negative stuff is we need to deeply understand the game and players so we can sit at the table with the game teams when they are designing new social features, designing new multiplayer experiences. And I'm telling you this right now, and literally that's what we're doing. We are at the table as co-designers of those features. There are cases where we actually do part of the development because it's a very rare situation that we have in Minecraft, and I don't take it for granted that we have engineers dedicated to safety.
I wish there were more companies like that. And I was so blessed at Riot to get to work with the player dynamics team. And I know Wes Hart, who's very active on the Thriving in Games group, because there were also player dynamics engineers there putting in work. You see a couple of the companies who have kind of been vanguards within the Thriving in Games group stepping up and saying like, hey, this is an investment space. But then I've also been at places where it is largely just responding to the negative, and it breaks my heart sometimes because I think it's when you let it get to the point when it's all responding to the negative, people just kind of want to leave it there. They don't see the potential positive if you can get the community going in the right way.
Yes, and then we are selling ourselves short as well as game developers and player safety professionals because we are talking about something in the big picture is a small part of communities. Like people can say all sorts of things, like when we look at the internet, we can say there's a lot of negative things that happen on the internet. It's true, but we also have to remember some of the bias that we have as human beings, that we pay a lot of attention to negative things. Right? Like we do put a big weight on negative experiences. So my experience throughout my whole career, looking at different metrics, talking to different people, looking at the reality of gaming, specifically talking about gaming communities now, most of the interactions, let's talk about text, for example, chat tags and things like that, most of those interactions are very much aligned with the purpose of those platforms and games. It's very much people talking about the game itself, talking about their hobbies, the things they love, talking about their days. That's like the majority of the interactions.
New skill tree unlocked. Combating negative bias in community spaces.
I really want to take a moment to pause to make sure you reflect on what we've just heard from Carlos. Carlos has spent his entire career building massive digital communities with hundreds of millions of players. And he's telling us right now that the vast majority of the interactions he sees in these internet communities are aligned with the purpose of those games, that they are not filled with negativity, that at their core, they are filled with positive intent.
Loading. League of Legends All Chat Case Study.
In a 2023 MIT Game Lab talk called Play Nice, The Science and Behavior of Online Games, 2 Riot team members talked about findings from their study of the All Chat feature in League of Legends. They found that 87% of disruptive behavior came from 92% of players without an easily bannable history of chronic disruptive behavior. That means that the stereotype of people just going into games to give people a bad time doesn't work. Only 13% of toxicity comes from people trying to give people a bad time. Everyone else, all of the other disruptive behavior is coming from people who just do it once or twice, who are just having a bad day. He has just banned the people who are making the bad behavior choices because there's always someone making that bad behavioral choice for the first time. And it turns out most of those bad behavioral choices are coming from someone who's doing it for the first time. But frequency of harm has nothing to do with the impact of the harm on others. Might be someone's first time having an outburst, but the harm is still the same. And so the entirety of prosocial design is really about creating spaces that see the good in people and make it easy to be good instead of making it easy to lean into our worst impulses. That's prosocial gaming.
Loading. Tutorial level. Motivators of play.
In the first chapter of my book, The Game Development Strategy Guide, we explore what makes humans play games. And we talk about 9 motivators of play. Some of them are very familiar. All of us can identify with the desire to feel like we can master something. There are also some motivators of play that speak to some of the things we've talked about, like companionship and competition, of course, for multiplayer gaming. But another one is education, the ability to play a game and come out better than we were before. And as a sandbox game, Minecraft enables that education, not just in the ability to learn how to build using Minecraft systems, but in some ways building a system that teaches.
Launching Podcast Level 5. Techniques for Prosocial Design. Encouraging positive behavior and preventing disruptive behavior.
Then you talk about disruption and harms in video games. Yes, it does exist. Of course, it is something that it's important, but that's a smaller percentage of the experience. So if all we say is that we're dealing with the negative, we're literally taking a very small slice of the pie, and then we're selling ourselves short, because then we're just saying, okay, we're the team that deals with this negative, but how about everything else? All the other opportunity that we have to create features and experiences that will drive better trust between players, better collaboration, better bonds between players. Because guess what? That is upstream of negative behavior, right? If the systems in the game and the game itself is fostering those connections between players, things like trust, then you are less likely to have disruption and harms downstream.
So you're saying that prosocial design is a way of preventing the eventual disruptive behavior from ever occurring at all?
We could be the team that deals with the symptoms, or we could be the team that's actually actively looking to root causes and help connect what we do to a more holistic approach to what is a thriving game, a game that brings so much joy to people, a game that has longevity and is relevant and it actually does a lot of good in the world.
Loading Podcast Level 6. Using games to teach in-game safety.
You lit up when you talked about the good in the world that Minecraft does. Can you tell me more about that?
This is one of the things that I'm deeply passionate about Minecraft. You know, just to give you an anecdote here, when I was applying for the job, I was in London, in the UK for an educational conference. And I had just literally applied for the job. And I saw this booth in the Microsoft booth. There was a Minecraft education booth. And then I saw somebody from, I think it was Cambridge. They were talking about how they use Minecraft education to teach English to kids who are learning English as a second language, right? And then you fast forward to earlier this year. I've been partnering with the Minecraft education team for a while now, but earlier this year we released the third game in the Cyber Safe series that's called Good Game. And we literally co-created a game about player safety, a game where the player goes through the scenarios of what is the right thing to do here if somebody's cheating, or if I see an inappropriate username? How do I reflect on my behavior? What are the tools that I can use? What's the role of a code of conduct and all that sort of stuff? This game has been played in this series millions of times, and teachers love it and players love it. Think about players like 7 to 12 or so in schools, and multiple people around the world are adopting it. There are governments that are saying we need to have this in the country, the educational program and in schools. So it's also this, it's so much broader than dealing with the negative. It's about how do we affect change, right? How can we go and create some change in terms of cultural change and empower people with the right digital skills?
I'm so excited to hear about the uptake on that game, because one thing about being a streamer, like with a small community, but like a woman on Twitch, right? You get people wandering into your chat and they don't always have the best chat manners, right? But I've been struck a couple of times where someone comes into my chat and engages in a way that would otherwise be seen as inappropriate, right? Like, comments on appearance or like proposes marriage or something and tries to turn it towards like gender-based stuff. And there's been one or two times, one time in specific, like someone was leaning into the marriage thing and my mods wanted to shut him down. And I don't know why, but I was like, I'm going to explain to you why that's not respectful. And we're just going to have a conversation here. And I was expecting them to continue trolling, but they were like, thank you. No one's ever taken the time to talk to me about like the boundaries. And they stayed through the rest of the chat and engaged. And so it feels like when you talk about the good game stuff, hitting people early, hitting people in childhood, where it's not awkward, like we're in a learning mindset. There's so much hope there that we just give people those constructs and those tools in a gaming environment. That's really exciting.
Yeah, that's a great example that you shared. And when you think about what is the divide between online and offline, right? Like it's all life. We say online life or offline life. It's all life. The lines are so blurred, but we have to remember that when we are in person, we have all sorts of affordances and signals and social norms and consequences that are much more visible and immediately accessible when we are in the analog world, right? But when you are in online situation, and as you know, it might be in a game, so maybe it's an avatar or in some cases not even that, and then you don't have all those tools, right, for human connection, and you don't have an immediate social consequence, which is huge, right? Like there's social cost to, like the example that you gave, that person gets into a social function somewhere, they probably wouldn't say that stuff. Oh. Right? Because the consequences are immediate in that situation. Like we're very much social beings, and we are so attuned to the idea of the opinion of others and the consequences of things that we might do and say. Online seems to dilute that quite a bit, right? Like we don't have as much of that immediately accessible to us. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we need to be very intentional about that online. As game developers, we need to be very intentional. We need to create the mechanisms to create more empathy, more understanding of those things, of social dynamics and consequences, and why those things matter. Yeah, I'm super excited about that series, Cyber Safe. Working on a new one.
Oh, that's so exciting.
There were two before Good Game, and they were more focused on security and privacy aspects. And the Good Game was really more explicitly about player safety scenarios. And then there's a new game coming up as well. And those are like, you can call them a game or a map, because we make them available also for free. Like those maps are free. When we launch the game, we make that game available through a logging-less demo as well. If folks go on the Bedrock edition of Minecraft to the marketplace, they can find it, Cyber Safe Good Game, and download it for free, for example, and enjoy it. It's like less than 1 hour. You can play through the map.
That's the other thing I love about that, is it takes some of the sort of emotional labor off of fellow players, creating this outlet where people can go and kind of like send people, or places where people might organically get those learnings, so that it's not always community members who have to like stop and intercept and be like, let me explain to you why proposing to a woman when she's done something good is like sending a signal that she only has value when she's like in a relationship. Like that's, but like you're creating an environment where people have a safe environment to go learn and not be judged, not have fear of judgment, not have fear of asking questions. And that's so beautiful.
Loading. Podcast level 7. Virtual friendships and digital belonging.
But I think also something I want to dig in with you on is something that's come up for me a little bit recently. And you mentioned the game design of player safety, and I agree with you completely. One thing I've run up with recently is the number of game developers who forget that players play with strangers. And I think we have such privilege because we're game developers and we have peers who are game players, and we just were like, and I've literally had conversations with employees who are like, well, we don't really need to lean into the friends feature. Like they have real life friends, they'll find each other, that we don't need discovery. We don't need communication stuff in game because it's just your real life friends. Can you talk a little bit about the role of digital first relationships in these communities and how that impacts players?
That is such a good point, right? Anecdotally, I'm sure folks who became great friends via online games. I've heard many stories of people who are partners now, who got married after meeting in games, right? I think we've all become very acutely aware of this specific value of games in the last 4 years, right? We've become very aware of it. There's also a generational understanding in what you're asking, right? The fact that there is a lot of bonds that are formed in those communities. There is, some really powerful things. Like I can tell you a story from the Club Penguin times that never left me. It was a kid who wrote us and basically said they were going through cancer and they were in the hospital, so they were there, and they felt like Club Penguin was the only way that they could really be themselves without judgment, right? So because you have the player avatar, and then nobody's going to judge you for your appearance because you're a penguin like everybody else, right? So they basically said it was the way that they were able to connect with other people in that situation, right? So I think when we talk about that, we have to broaden our perspectives again, right? Like that point I made about bias, we have to try to see the world through the lenses of other people. This idea of some people might be, they really value that opportunity to connect with others because of whatever situation they have going on in their lives, right? And I want to be careful here too, because what I'm saying is that I'm undervaluing the analog friendships, right? Because again, I think it's all life, right? Like if we make too much distinction in my mind between digital and analog, I think we might miss some points. And I think it's so important, at least from my perspective personally, to have those face-to-face relationships and deep, rich friendships and all those things. But at the same time, I don't think we should dismiss the depth and importance of belonging to an online community, right? Because that's important too. And that's an element. And nowadays, wow, oh my gosh, like you can have a friend who is across the ocean and you play games with, and you might have some really deep conversations with that person. And maybe you tell them things that you don't tell anybody else, right? So yeah, your point about missing the point on the design for better systems for discovery and making friends, that's a big miss, right? Because we know this from multiple papers, studies, and things that people have done in the gaming industry, that when people socialize in the game, they just have such a great time in the game, and they're much more likely to keep playing the game, right? Because now there is like this social element. Well, my friend Cheryl is there in the game as well. I want to go back to it because I want to hang out with her, right? So it becomes bigger than the game in a sense. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what people sometimes can miss.
Yeah, that bigger, that connected tissue that gets you through the slow times, the content creates this, it turns the game into one of those mysterious third places.
Loading podcast level 8, skills and career advice.
What skills do you think are most critical to your success? When we talk about like people who are kind of looking at your career path and probably very inspired, and maybe I think a lot of people would be very, very passionate about finding ways to work in this space and create positive ripples. What do you find yourself drawing on the most?
Curiosity is a big one. It definitely is a big one, right? Like it's what led me to this area to begin with. It's just curious about how this works, And in a sense, it's a very philosophical thing. It's fascinating, right, to look at human dynamics, the way that people behave and relate to each other online and in a game. It's really fascinating. So the other thing that has been a common thing in my career is this strong sense of purpose. And maybe you heard some of that coming through when I'm talking about Club Penguin and Minecraft education, right? Like making the world better through the power of games, right? Like I believe in this. Like I think that games can really be a very strong, powerful medium, right? Like there's very tangible ways to do this, and I'm blessed to work for a company that does a lot of partnerships and things that are really meaningful socially, like a social impact team and all that. So I think that when you're considering a career in game development, can you connect something that's really fundamental about who you are, like your values and your principles, to your work? Because if you can, then I think that there is like a really cool thing there to follow. The other thing that I've found critical to my career is communication. But I find that my role as director of player safety is a lot about communication. Like I'm communicating not only to my teams and manager and to my peers, but also to different partners inside the studio, and also partners in Microsoft Gaming and Xbox and like everywhere, like talking to many people. And that it's talking about internally, but then there's communication externally as well, like we're doing right now, or talking to players in different ways, and from the resources that we create and the way that we talk about player safety. So there's a lot of communication. And then over my career, I really started to understand like what is good communication, what good looks like there, because communication can't just be talking at people, right? Like it has to be listening and understanding where people are coming from. I think that's a super valuable skill. I'll say one more, being adaptable. I think that's so important. Like perhaps this word gets thrown around a lot, but resilience, which is, by the way, a critical element of player safety, right? Like, for example, we do wellness and resilience training for our teams, and I'm a part of the training. I try to really walk the walk there, and I bring experts to talk to the team about wellness and resilience and do training. The gaming industry is a rough industry in some aspects. I mean, we've all been very aware of it, right? Like, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of hardship that happens in the industry. And then let alone when you talk about working in player safety, you're going to see some difficult things, right, when you're dealing in this area. So I think the overall idea of adaptation and resilience is a great thing.
That was actually one of the last questions I wanted to ask, was how you help your teams deal with the things they can't control, those sort of spikes in experience, because the stakes are so high. People are emotional. It is unpredictable in these social environments that we deal with, and these very good people trying to do very good work are going to have to see the things they're trying to fix.
Well, it's related to my previous answer, actually, right? So there's this idea of a connection to purpose helps a lot, right? But then you really have to get good about, like you said, there are things that you don't control. And it goes back to that point that I made in the beginning of our conversation about how things are ambiguous, how people communicating with each other online can be very complex, nuanced, and you don't have all the answers. So we also have to remember that, yes, we have a purpose and we have a focus on what we're doing, but we have to remember that those are very large society forces as well, right? So we can really focus on what we can control. And I think that's particularly relevant for folks working in player safety, like work on what you can really control and change and improve, always with that mentality, right? Like with that learning approach that I mentioned earlier. And then this idea of building wellness and resilience, it can't be a one-off. You can't just do a training like, once a year. You have to be refreshing that training and talking and creating psychological safety and openness and all those things to be vulnerable. There are moments that I come to the team and I say, this topic is hard and, I'm going to need a little bit of a break, or to try to model that to people exactly, that it's okay, like that we are human beings. We're finite. We have finite resources and mental energy. You can't try to solve everything. This idea of it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to understand that you need to take care of yourself, and that's a priority. That is not like a afterthought. It's a real priority. But then we really get into culture, right? Like I really try to foster a culture in my team of being very candid, respectfully candid, right? Like, if you disagree, we talk about it. If there's something that we are not seeing, other people might be overlooking, talk about it, bring it up. Those are sometimes they're hard conversations, but that's how we've been able to build trust and be a very nimble team. We are able to iterate and learn and make changes very fast. It's because we are frank with each other and paying attention to wellness and resilience and things like that.
Loading. Final podcast level. Links and follow-up.
How would you recommend people keep up with your work after the podcast? I assume a big part of it is your work with the Thriving in Games group.
100% the work of the Thriving in Games group. Now the organization has the Digital Thriving Playbook.
digitalthrivingplaybook.org. You can always check the show notes.
There are dozens of frameworks and examples and different methods there for how to go and design games and systems to be more conducive to prosocial behavior, to a thriving community, right? So it's super rich. I have been using it a lot. I have been cheering the team from the sidelines because I haven't been directly involved like my peers on TIG. I was doing other work for the organization before. The team has created incredible stuff that I have been using all the time. I keep sharing with people in the industry internally at Microsoft Gaming. I'm sharing all the time. And sometimes I go there and I search things like, is there any method on trust? How do you create systems to build trust between players? Sure enough, you're going to get a bunch of hits. It's surprised by the depth of and quality of those resources, right? So I definitely recommend folks go there. And also go to thrivingingamesgroup.org. That's the new website, right? Like that's formerly known as the Fair Play Alliance. Just like an incredible community of practice there with so many people. So I think that's where you can find most of it. And if the Minecraft education series, definitely I encourage folks to take a look at that. So just type cyber safe Minecraft education and check out the games that we have released and that we'll be releasing as well.
Great.
Of course, more on my side of things, I think the best bet is just to find me on LinkedIn and connect there.
Thank you. I'm definitely citing a lot of the Digital Thriving Playbook work and the TIG work in my book. It's just so helpful. And the definitions too, just having a shared understanding of how do we define disruption? How do we define these terms? That could save hours of back and forth on a team just putting those things together. And there's just so many great frameworks and lists of things and examples of pro-social behaviors in games and things like that. So I echo your recommendation. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been a delight talking to you. Join us next time for more journeys, more thriving. Great minds think alike. Thriving is, I came up with the title for my book and then y'all changed your name and I was like, see, it's thriving. Thriving is the moment. It's the movement. Thank you so, so much, Carlos.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed Carlos's perspective, make sure to check out how his work features in my book, The Game Development Strategy Guide, now available for pre-order from rosenfeldmedia.com. Head there before September 16th, 2025 for a 15% discount and free ebooks with every physical purchase. You can always find the show notes at enduringplay.com. Join me next time for another conversation with one of the experts featured in my book as we explore what it takes to create video games that don't just survive, but thrive.
Initiating final credits sequence. Podcast. Enduring Play. Created and produced by Cheryl Platts. Copyright Idea Platts, LLC. All rights reserved. Podcast theme composed by Cheryl Platts. To learn more about Cheryl's books, visit rosenfeldmedia.com. For book and podcast merch, go to ideaplats.dashery.com. Follow Cheryl on Blue Sky at Funny Godmother or at ideaplats.com. To learn more about IdeaPlats, the design education consultancy, visit ideaplats.com.